I'm Councilmember Matt Orlando. In today's episode of Chandler In Focus, we'll be talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that's water. We'll talk a little bit today about the investment of water, how it's delivered, and basically how it affects you, the residents and the business in our community. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's in our headlines today, and that's the Colorado River and how we were prepared for that water shortage. I'm joined today by Chandler's water manager, resource manager, Simone Kjolsrud. Simone, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So we've done this before, and now it's more relevant than before because we're now facing these, quote, Colorado River cuts and what that really means to Chandler. So we see in the headlines, since there's a lot of sensationalism going on, and rightly so, because there is a critical need right now, particularly not just in Chandler, but the whole Southwest and even other parts of our nation, with the Colorado River particularly thus. So help us separate the fact from fiction, and is it time to panic?
Well, I definitely don't think it's time to panic.
Thank you.
I would say the Colorado River it's a serious issue. I've heard people say that we're having a crisis. The important thing to remember is that one dry year on the Colorado River is not something to panic over. It is a very, very, very bad year. It's a bad hydrologic year. It's probably going to be one of the worst years on record for the Colorado River, at least in the past 20 to 30 years. We haven't seen hydrology quite this bad. And part of the reason it's such a bad year is because we had a very, very warm March. So what we would normally be seeing is that we're just getting to the point where it's heating up enough that snow is starting to melt, and we're starting to see how much of the water we're going to get from this year's snowpack actually make it into the reservoirs. Unfortunately, this year we had such a warm March that that snow started to melt very early, and what we're realizing is that we're going to be historic lows. Right now, the projections for this water year is that we'll end the year somewhere around 30% of what a normal year is. Currently at this moment, if you just kind of took the water year to date, we're only at about 23% of the 30-year average in terms of projected inflows for the Colorado River. So it's a very difficult year. What we need to remember is that water planners, they plan for very, very long time frames. So in Arizona, we have a 100-year assured water supply. So most of the cities that have a 100-year assured water supply, they're planning their water supplies 50 years, 70 years, 100 years out into the future. And they're already making sure that they're planning for backup supplies during years like this, when we have a very bad year on the Colorado River.
But it's not just this year alone. As you know, well, where the last 15, 20 years, it's really been a declining water, entering into the Colorado River system.
That is absolutely true. We're seeing significant long-term decline, and that's for a whole bunch of reasons. Climate change is definitely partly to blame, that we're just seeing that the river is producing less water than it used to. Part of that is having to do with warmer conditions, drier soils. A lot of the snowpack gets absorbed into the soil. We're also seeing a lot more sublimation than what used to be the case, whereas snow is actually kind of evaporating into the atmosphere. So what we're seeing is that even in a year where we have relatively average snowpack, not as much of that water is actually making its way to the reservoirs. Some of it's getting sucked into the soil or sublimating into the atmosphere, and we're just not getting the same kind of runoff that we used to see from an average year's snowpack. So we're definitely expecting that we need to plan for less water coming from the Colorado River, probably permanently. And so that's a really hard adjustment that everyone is having to get used to, and starting to look towards what are some other supplies that might be able to replace some of those lost Colorado River supplies. Yeah,
and so let's continue that. So what is that, the declining Colorado delivery of water to us, how does that impact Chandler and, quite frankly, the cities in central Arizona?
It's a very good question. We're all on the edge of our seat to find out the answer to that very question. And I'll tell you why it's hard to know for sure right now. We have been eagerly awaiting a consensus solution by all 7 of the basin states that rely on the Colorado River, and also the Republic of Mexico.
Can you explain a little bit? So we got the upper states, in the lower states, correct?
Sure.
So,
The upper basin states are Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, and Utah.
Right.
The lower basin states are Arizona, California, and Nevada.
and pretty much Arizona, California, and Nevada have been pretty much in the same predicament, relying on the upper states to cooperate with us to be able to, for their water is what the issue is right now?
Well,
the flow.
The Colorado River water is divided evenly between the upper basin and the lower basin.
Okay, got
and
it.
so what the 7 states have been working on, we have a long history of managing the river based on consensus. And when there's shortage, having all 7 of the states and Mexico all kind of work collaboratively to agree on how are we going to manage those shortages when the river doesn't provide as much water as what maybe on paper we had expected it would. So right now, we're operating Lake Powell and Lake Mead under what's called the 2007 guidelines, and that's the agreement that was made back in 2007. The problem is those guidelines expire this year, and so we're really running out of time to put a new framework in place that replaces those guidelines that are expiring. And that has to do with things like how are the two large reservoirs like Powell and Lake Mead, how are they managed conjunctively? How do you decide how much water you release from Powell to Mead? Those are some really important things that affect the water supply for the lower basin. So we've been waiting for years for the 7 basin states to come up with a proposal that they could all agree on for how we were going to do that going forward, starting in 2027 and beyond. Unfortunately, as you've probably seen in the headlines, they have not been able to reach a consensus solution. So that keeps us all kind of on the edge of our seat to find out what is next year going to look like.
And that's So what is next year going to look like? Do we don't have any crystal ball here?
The big news that just came out about a week ago was that we do actually have a consensus proposal from the 3 lower basin states. So Arizona, California, Nevada got together and said, you know, we're tired of waiting for the upper basin to get on board, right? The position of the upper basin for the past few years of these negotiations has really been, you know, that's the lower basin's problem. We're not going to agree to help take any reductions. You know, if there's reductions needed, the lower basin needs to figure it out. And the lower basin, obviously, that's not an acceptable position to us. So it's really kind of led to a stalemate. But we're at a point where the guidelines are expiring. The hydrology this year is really bad. And so we're looking at kind of an emergency situation to figure out how do we at least stabilize the reservoir at least for a couple years to buy us some time to figure out how to get a more long-term permanent solution in place that everyone can agree on. So the lower basin states came together. They worked on a proposal together that everybody could live with. It's a very short-term proposal. It just gets us through the next 2 years. But at least it's an agreement in the lower basin about how we can all share in some of the shortages that are
what's coming
required.
down. It's that we're getting that share is what you're saying. Got it.
Yeah, so we would be
So we're dividing
sharing-
up the smaller volume of water is what you're saying.
Exactly, just for 2 years. And this agreement has not been accepted by the federal government yet. So it's a proposal that was submitted by the 3 lower basin states. We don't know yet whether the federal government will accept that proposal. We certainly hope they do. We think that it's a fair and reasonable way of getting through the next couple years where Arizona, California, and Nevada were all sharing in the shortages and it's not all falling onto the Central Arizona Project. So we really appreciate our neighbors kind of working collaboratively with us and agreeing that we all need to share in some of the pain of the reduced flows of the Colorado River.
And then the cities, obviously that flows to the cities, I guess. Now we have to look at what our cuts would be individually, obviously.
Right.
Some cities will affect it more than others.
It's going to be a little different for each city. That's right, because each city has a different portfolio of water resources. So each city has a different amount of Colorado River water in their particular water resource portfolio. In Chandler, for us, about 1/3 of our normal supplies come from the Colorado River. Most of our water supplies in Chandler actually come from the Salt and Verde system, the Salt and Verde rivers that gets delivered through the SRP canal system. But for the portion of our supplies that do come from the Colorado River, and for most of the kind of Phoenix area cities down to Tucson that have some portion of their supplies coming from the Colorado River, if the federal government accepts the lower basin proposal, it looks like somewhere around roughly a 20% cut for most cities, 20% cut to whatever portion of their supplies come from the Colorado River.
I see. Yeah, and unfortunately, that's reality we have to be facing. At least we're preparing for it. Now, Chandler has been preparing for water for like 60, 70 years now. It's unbelievable what our policy put in place. And can you tell us about some of the proactive measures we've done over the years to help ensure we have enough water during the shortages.
Sure. So I will say, I think Chandler has been one of the most proactive cities in planning for water shortages. One of the really important things that we did back in the 2014-2015 timeframe is that we went out and did a big acquisition of water supplies. So it was a really historic deal at the time. There had not ever been anything quite like it, where we entered into several agreements with the Gila River Indian community, and some of that was water we exchange with them. We give them some of our reclaimed water, they give us some of their Colorado River water. Other aspects of the deal involved a lease for water and also some credits that we acquired from them. So it was kind of a combination of several different deals all in kind of one big deal. But the city of Chandler spent about $50 million on that water acquisition. And, you know, back then everybody said, oh, you're crazy, you're spending so much money on this water acquisition. Fast forward 10 years, that acquisition we did is actually what has put us in a really good position to be able to weather the storm, so to speak, on shortages. So we're in a much better position today because we did that acquisition back then. What we also did at the same time, because we knew that we were spending some money to acquire additional water supplies, we put in place a large volume water user ordinance. And so sometimes you'll hear us refer to that as our water allocation policy. And what that means is we passed an ordinance at that time that said if anyone wants to come in and locate their business in Chandler, and if they're going to use more than kind of the average amount of water use that most businesses in that category use, then we're going to have to look at, do we have the water supplies to serve that demand, and is that consistent with the city's strategic goals for economic development? And so it kind of put in place a framework to allow us to evaluate any new large volume water user that wanted to come into the city to make sure we had the water supplies to serve them.
We might talk a little bit about that later on, but you know, we also did something very ingenious, quite frankly, is we used to have storage credits up north, Litchfield Park area, I can't remember exactly. And now we sold that, and we're actually taking water directly from the Colorado River.
I think you're referring to our reclaimed water interconnect facility.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another very important infrastructure planning decision that was made, and it's something that is active and online today, but these kinds of planning decisions had to get made 7, 8, 9 years ago in order to be at the point we are today. But what our reclaimed water interconnect facility does for us is it actually allows us to take our Colorado River water and even some of our SRP water that we do kind of aquifer recharge and recovery with. And we now can deliver that water into Chandler's service area and to recharge our local aquifer here, rather than sending that water to, you're probably referring to the facility that's in Glendale, that's
the
a
northwest
regional SRP facility. It's called NAUSP. We decided that we were going to sell some of our capacity in that facility because we didn't want to be recharging the aquifer, you know, in West Phoenix. We wanted to be recharging the aquifer.
We want the water here.
Chandler. Right.
We want it here. None of this credit stuff.
We're doing our best to make sure that all of the aquifer recharge that we're doing is very local to Chandler, so that when the day comes that we need to rely on some of our backup water supplies, water that we've been storing underground, that our aquifer is really nice and healthy here in Chandler. And that's an important point, that for about the past 30 to 35 years, Chandler has been taking the extra water supplies that we have above and beyond what we need to meet our customer demands, and we've been recharging that into the aquifer. So we've made hundreds of millions of dollars of investments in aquifer recharge facilities here in Chandler, in addition to the reclaimed water interconnect facility, which allows us to kind of get that water where it needs to go to get to our recharge facilities. All of those investments mean that we've stored about 500,000 acre feet of water underground that can be relied on as a backup supply for future use when we have a dry year.
And of course, like Veterans Oasis Park is a water storage percolated to the ground. Other areas around the city, we've done that as well. So we not only turn this water supply, we've actually make a recreational use as well.
That's right.
So yeah.
That's right. We have a couple different types of recharge facilities. So if you've been to the recharge basins at Veterans Oasis Park, it looks like they're just lakes that are nice to look at and provide a multi-use benefit for both people and birds and nature. But they're actually providing a really, really important water management benefit, which is we can deliver any of our reclaimed water there. We can deliver our Colorado River water there. Any extra water that we have each year, that's one of the recharge facilities we're going to deliver it to percolate down through the soil and recharge the aquifer. And then we get credit for the water that we deliver there. Yeah. We have a couple other facilities that are a little different. They're a little more hidden. If you're walking around Tumbleweed Park, you might have never noticed, but sprinkled all through Tumbleweed Park is it's a recharge facility. Now those are not big recharge basins where you see the water. What we do there is we actually inject the water through what's called ASR wells, aquifer storage and recovery wells. So those wells can pump in either direction. In the summer, when we need to meet demand, we can pump those wells to get water out. And in the winter, when we have lower demand, we can inject water down into the aquifer through those wells.
Whew, mind-boggling. But we're good, right?
We're good.
All right.
We're good.
So how does this Colorado River shortage impact our growth and development, Chandler?
Well, I think one of the really important things that Chandler has done is through our general plan and through our utility master plan, we have planned for many decades, we have planned for Colorado River shortage. It's something that has been built into our kind of culture of water planning. Is we always knew that there would be shortages on the Colorado River. So in terms of water acquisition, storing water underground to make sure that we have backup supplies when we need it. We've invested in other regional infrastructure, like Chandler was one of just a handful of cities that invested in raising Roosevelt Dam so that we could store more water behind Roosevelt Dam. And so now when we have a really strong year on the SRP system, and we get a lot more water behind Roosevelt Dam, that's now another new supply of water that Chandler has access to help us get through drier years on the Colorado River. So all of that water, what it's done for us by planning proactively for so many years, it's put us in a position where all of the growth and development that we have planned through our general plan and our master plan, we've already secured the water supplies that we need, even when you factor in those shortages.
And you have to have a 100-year water supply anyway in order to build, redevelop that type of activity. And,
that's correct.
And we're just going through that process, getting recertified right now, right?
We are. So we have to do that every 10 to 15 years. The Arizona Department of Water Resources asks us to go back and renew that 100-year designation, which is important because things change in water, and they need to come back and look at that with a fresh set of eyes every 10 years and say, okay, does Chandler still have a 100-year assured water supply, not just for all of your existing demands, but also for all of your future projected demands. So they're looking at our existing customers today, how much those customers need, and they're also looking at all of the future projected growth for 100 years. And they're saying, do you have enough water to do that for 100 years? And the answer has been yes.
So, bottom line, businesses, residents, we have an assured water supply for at least 100 years. All right, we're good. I'm good. So there's another part of this equation. In all fairness, just because we've done a great job in capturing water, agreements, recharge, we're still conserving. And we still need to conserve our water.
Of course.
So what are we doing in that area?
Of course. So Chandler has actually been has had one of the most robust water conservation programs of any city in the Phoenix area, at least for the past 30 years. We've been doing water conservation programs really since the early 90s. And we have kind of, I would say, two categories of programs. We have the programs that we've designed for our residents and our businesses to take advantage of. And so that's going to be things like turf to zero escape rebates. We've got smart controller rebates. We have all sorts of really great services that we offer to our residents. If they need help with how do I water more efficiently, we actually have staff that will go out to their house and help them figure out how to be watering efficiently and how to program their smart controller. We have those smart controller rebates to make sure that they're using the best technology. On the businesses side, we have some of those same programs that are catered specifically to commercial users, where we can help them with water efficiency technology recommendations. They've got some customized turf to zero escape programs they can take advantage of. And we've seen a really, really significant increase over the past 3 years in our customers, both residential and commercial, really taking advantage of those programs. We have a cooling tower program for our commercial customers with cooling towers. Cooling towers use a lot of water. It's really important that we're being efficient with water use in cooling towers. That new program, which was launched in 2023, has really helped some of our commercial customers save a lot of water just in the past few years. So we're putting everything we can into helping our customers know how to be as efficient with their water use as possible. In addition to all of the programs we offer for our residents, workshops, all of those sorts of things, we also are doing everything we can within Chandler to make sure that Chandler is using water as efficiently as possible, right? The city is one of our largest water customers. We use water in our parks. We use water in all of our buildings and facilities. We use water at our recreation facilities. So we've really put a concerted effort, especially over the past 3 to 5 years, where we've had independent consultants come in and audit all of our city facilities, look through everything we use, everything that uses water in all of our city facilities, and we found some things. And so all of those things that consultant found, we've implemented all of those repairs. Our cooling towers are all optimized at peak efficiency. We've also been doing some turf to xeriscape programs within city property. We were able to get a $3 million grant from the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority for phase 1 of our turf to xeriscape program. That phase is actually complete, and we removed over 1 million square feet of grass from Chandler properties. That's huge, because 1 million square feet
These are
of grass,
more like retention basins and things like that.
These are from stormwater
These aren't parks,
retention
it's just
basins.
retention basins.
Correct. And they're along major streets where they're not really being used by the public, but they're using a lot of water, right? So just the phase 1 alone, each of those retention basins use somewhere between 3 to 6 million gallons of water every year. We converted about 8 of those. So if you do the math there, it's a very significant amount of water. It's enough water to serve 150 to 200 homes each year, just in the water savings from converting those couple of sites.
Yeah. And we work a lot with residents there. Some residents want a little bit of turf because they were soccer fields practicing. Some said, yeah, we don't use it at all, and so that was good that we.
Yeah, we worked really closely with our residents to make sure that they were happy with the outcome.
The other thing you brought up to me a few months ago, which I thought was intriguing, something as simple as, when do you cut our shrubbery? Because like our medians now, if we let that grow a little bit taller, wider, without being obstructive, you could actually save water, because that tree is not, or that shrubbery is not absorbing the water to regrow.
Right. There's all sorts of landscape management practices that you can use to be more water efficient. We're starting to really work with our Parks Department is starting to work with their landscape maintenance contracts to be kind of managing landscaping from a more water efficient perspective. The parks have also done an amazing job. They're partnering on a grant program with SRP that allows all of our parks to get a lot more efficient with their irrigation use. So SRP has helped with coming in and providing some of the funding to do extensive audits for all of our city parks, all of the irrigation systems in our city parks, to make sure that we know any little valve that might be broken, any little leak that's coming out of a drip system. We've gone through every single inch of I think we've gotten through about 5 of our parks, and we have a program over the next 5 years to get through every single park in Chandler to do a comprehensive irrigation audit and to make all of the repairs that are necessary. We want to be leading the example and showing the way for how to be water efficient.
Simone, thank you again for coming out today and give us a little bit more background on what's happening in Chandler's water. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the water infrastructure in Chandler.
Did you know the city of Chandler has over 36,000 valves and more than 1,200 miles of water pipe to maintain? Part of this maintenance includes a capital improvement program to identify which water mains are susceptible to breaks and fix them before they become a problem for all of us.
What concerns me the most is that when a water main does break, number one, it becomes a public safety hazard. There could be other buried utilities in the area that are impacted. And then number two, the amount of property damage and disruption to the community is a big concern for me.
Gina Ashita Rayborn is a principal engineer with the city's Public Works Department. She tells me that a lot of pipes were installed at the same time during housing and population booms in the last 50 years, which means that the lifespan of the pipes will also all come due at the same time.
There was a water main break that occurred not too long ago over near the Delaware Street and Chandler Boulevard area, which is very close to downtown. Fortunately, the damage was not super extensive. However, it was very visible to a lot of city employees, council, and the public. That particular break was a very old cast iron water main, which was installed somewhere in the 1950s, we believe. So that's definitely one of the priority types of mains that we want to try and replace.
As the city works towards its goals, construction continues at a few different sites, including Sunset and Tyson Manor. This major project includes the replacement of 20,000 feet of water mains across 3 high-priority areas within the city. Some of that process includes moving the water mains from their originally installed location in the back alleys to the front of the homes to better protect property and for easier access.
It's a very long-term project. And it's designed to be that way. It's been ongoing in City of Chandler, but we're essentially trying to ramp it up.
Within the past month, Chandler City Council has continued to approve funds for this program exactly on schedule to pave the way to ramp up replacements from the current half mile of pipe a year to nearly 8 miles annually. To learn more, visit chandleraz.gov/water supply. For the City of Chandler, I'm Lydia Curry.
Joining me now is Jeremy Abbott, our Director of Utilities and Public Works Department. Jeremy, we just saw a film on the video highlights of how we're improving our infrastructure, adding more miles of piping. Can you give us a little more background on what's going on in that particular area?
Absolutely, and thanks again for having me, Councilmember Orlando. So our water main replacement program is a very important capital improvement program. And the driver behind that really is our master planning effort and identifying our high-risk water mains. These are our water mains that have aged out or are reaching the end of their life. And currently there's about 187 miles that we know today that reach that highest risk category. And so it's important for us to reinvest and continue to invest in that infrastructure. And a term that many of us are hearing is aged infrastructure. So we want to get ahead of the game and be proactive in that approach and strategically replace those mains in lieu of the alternative, reacting to main breaks. Right. That does many things for us. It helps, again, conserve and reduce lost water by replacing those main lines, as well as with that planned approach, it reduces the impacts of that water loss or during that emergency to our businesses and to our residents, as well as the impact that those breaks have on our surface infrastructure, our roadways and our sidewalks. When a water main breaks, they make a mess, right? And that impacts everyday life. So though we are seeing our main breaks increase, again, this investment is to ensure that we can maintain that and reduce that overall, keeping a level of service for our residents that they would expect when it comes to water service.
No, Jeremy, thank you for that. And that makes more sense, being proactive rather than, like I said, shutting a roadway down for 2 or 3 days while you pump the water, fix the main. So I'm glad we're trying to get ahead of that. And obviously the bonds we passed over the last few years, thanks to the residents, is helping support some of that program, because those bonds will actually allow us to sell them and then be able to get the revenue to be able to go fix those main pipes. So thanks our residents out there for helping us solve this problem you're speaking about. Look, it's no secret that our rates are going up throughout the valley and probably throughout the United States when it comes to water infrastructure. Chandler's no different, although our rates are not as steep because we have been handling it over the years as some communities are. What does that replacement program mean to our water rates?
Well, again, yes, very, very important topic to our residents, and we're very proud to have very low utility rates here in Chandler. But again, that the increase to our rates to support these important programs are necessary. So from a perspective of impact to those rates, you could probably equate to our upcoming rate to about 1% of that is attributed to our water main replacement program. And that starts off, I'll say, small per se.
Right.
We're looking at ramping up this program over the years. Our current average is about a half a mile a year. And AWWA, the American Water Works Association, recommends utilities and or to suggest that they replace their aging infrastructure at a rate of about 1% per year. based on our total mileage that we have in our system, 1,200 miles, that'd be about 12 miles per year. So we're not quite to 12 miles per year. We're going to slowly ramp that up over time. And eventually our goal right now is to get to about 8 miles per year. But that's going to take a lot of adjustments internally and how we lay out those programs and how we get that construction done. And also working very closely with our businesses and our residents to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. Obviously, shutting roads down for 12 miles a year is a heavy lift. And obviously you have to be realistic as well. So that's a guideline, that 1%, whatever the case may be. But in reality, we have a lot of other infrastructure projects going along. So it may be it'd be tough to get to that 12. But again, there's a good area, at least we got a goal of 8 miles potentially down the road. So that's a good point you're bringing up. So I hate to shut down roads for but our normal infrastructure then shut for wastewater and other things are going on.
And that's a very good point. That's not something that as we start and complete these capital projects throughout Chandler, we're very cautious about how they impact the community. And as well as how they impact the rest of our infrastructure. So another area that we're looking at is how does our main replacement program impact? How can we correlate or bundle, if you will, those main replacement projects with other capital projects and or even our pavement maintenance program?
Right.
Council's been very supportive in increasing our investment in maintaining our roadways. And so we don't want to identify and start replacing a water main underneath a roadway that we recently, invested in. So we'll be very strategic and look at our high-risk water mains in areas that also have very degraded and or low PQI rated pavement.
PQI?
Pavement Quality Index, so that is the rating scale that we quantify the condition of our pavement.
So the higher PQI, the smoother the road, or less?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
less damage, things like that over the years?
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yep. The higher the PQI, the better the rideability, the better the structural integrity of that pavement, as well as the aesthetics.
And the long term, you don't have to provide maintenance to that if it's a higher PQI. Is that what's the rationalization is there?
Higher PQI still requires maintenance, but the cost of that maintenance is much lower.
Got it.
And it extends the life of that pavement much longer.
Makes sense now. So what are the other water infrastructure investments we're doing in Chandler? And obviously these impact water rates as well.
So we have a lot. And one of our, I'll say, single largest investments that we just broke ground on earlier in January is focused at our Pecos surface water treatment plant. And we will be investing over the next couple of years over $100 million in that treatment facility. We're going to be focused on processes that will allow us to treat highly turbid water. So again, we're dealing with changing water quality and the surface water that we receive from CAP and SRP. And these investments will help us treat essentially anything they send to us and future-proof us, if you will, again, for the future and our ability to treat that water.
So are we seeing a higher, what was the word you used? I'm sorry.
Turbidity?
Right, turbidity. What's happening there is just as reservoirs are lowering, is there more of that activity turned up the bottom, or how does that? Just curious.
Yeah, so turbidity, it's a fluctuating component of our surface water, and nature has a big impact on that, as well as fires. So fires really add to that, and if we have fires up north or in the SRP watersheds, essentially what happens is with the loss of those forests, after rains come in, it washes that sediment and those burned organic materials into the water, and so that creates high organic content as well as turbidity in that water.
So that's something we're dealing with. Obviously, as fires increase, we're dealing with that more today than we were maybe yesterday, years ago.
Correct.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously this all affects water infrastructure rates. And again, as we talked about earlier, we've been really good about keeping our rates pretty steady. And we certainly appreciate the residents. But again, we have to do these infrastructure improvements. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves behind schedule. And like some other communities in the Valley as well as the United States, where they just let it go. And then all of a sudden you got these big rate spikes because now you have to play catch up. So.
Yeah, and I get asked often, how does Chandler keep the rates low? And my response is that continued, consistent investment in that infrastructure. So again, keeping in tune with that and always addressing that keeps those rates.
Good. So we just invested a water metering system technology called Advanced Metering Infrastructure. Can you explain a little bit of what that is?
Yeah, so AMI is the short name. And essentially, we have been working on this program for a handful of years, updating a lot of our meters. And I'll say the old way of reading meters is we physically had a meter reader go out through various cycles throughout the city and read these meters to quantify what their bill is and again, tracking that revenue for the city. So converting to AMI, what this does is it changes how we manage that and how we receive that information. And we more or less automate that. So we receive that information through this network that we've created, and we receive that information now instead of on a monthly basis, we're receiving that water usage data on a daily basis. And that does many things for us. It will be very integral as we move forward with our master planning efforts. It will give us more accurate data in terms of water demands from our customers, from our residents, as well as it will allow us to, from a conservation standpoint, respond and communicate to our residents much sooner when we see spikes in use. If there's a leak, we will see that very readily, and we will be able to respond and help those residents get those things addressed. So it conserves water as well.
Well, that's good, yeah. And when would that be implemented?
So the schedule is to be fully implemented about this time next year.
Good.
And one of the biggest components that will impact our residents is our customer portal. That will be the application, if you will, that they will interact to look at their water usage, pay their bill, and it'll be a platform for us to better communicate to our customers as well.
So Jeremy, we talked a little bit about water main breaks, obviously, and piping infrastructure. We talked a little bit about the waste, the treatment plant. Wastewater is also a part of the utility cost, correct?
Absolutely.
And how does that affect as wastewater? As we're processing the wastewater?
So
because we're getting new water in,
correct,
and we're doing some treatment to that, obviously, right? So that's an infrastructure cost, and then we're obviously with wastewater being treated. So how does that work?
Yeah, so it's really it's one big cycle. And after we treat the raw water, we send it out through our distribution systems to our customers. They use it, and it gets flushed. We collect it through our our sewer collection system at our various water reclamation facilities, where it is then hence treated again. And it's treated to a level, an A+ quality level as designated by the state, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, so that we are able to use it as reclaimed water. So from that point, then it's reused again. And we use it, we send it out through a reclaim system for irrigation purposes, as well as we can recharge that for later use.
When you say recharge, you mean like put that through the water system to be able to be delivered to the taps? Or recharge in the ground?
Recharge in the ground. Yep.
Got it. So once we take it out of the ground, also you have to
treat it again.
So
yes.
Yeah. So you can see where the costs are rising here if you're playing around with. That's all like a cycle of what's going on with our water. Yeah, it's a fascinating water treatment. Anything else you want to share about what drives obviously the cost of water, infrastructure, wastewater? Obviously, we've built ponds in the past. We talked about it a little bit earlier with Simone. Anything else that we could be talking that adds to the entire cycle?
Yeah, so something that is out of sight typically and out of mind for the general public, but adds a lot of operational and maintenance costs to the system are our remote facilities. These are our wells, our reservoirs, our booster stations. They are the locations, and they're scattered all throughout the city of Chandler. They store the water that's treated, and then as the demands increase, those booster stations push them out through the distribution pipes for service. So those facilities are large. Again, they're intended to be somewhat in the background and hidden, but they are costly. And again, they're an important asset in our system, and we do spend and invest a considerable amount of funds into those facilities.
And we have a robust well system, as you know, too. So I'm very impressed with that, which, again, a cost.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
not only to build the well, obviously, and we have 30 something.
Yeah, we have about 30 active wells.
Right.
And they help obviously offset our peak demands. But also, in times when we take our plants down for service, they can offset and still continue with that supply. So they add a lot of redundancy to our overall water system.
Jeremy, thank you very much for coming out today. Certainly appreciate all of your enlightening comments on what's happening, on how we actually build our water rates. It's not just one little element. It's everything from infrastructure to wastewater treatment plant to storage, pumping it, getting out to the residents, going back into the system. It's a mind-boggling experience, and thank you very much today. I also want to thank Simone as well for her enlightening conversation of how we actually get our water, store it, make sure that Chandler residents have that so you could process it. So as you can tell today, a lot goes on behind the water scene. We have an insured water supply for at least 100 years. We've been designated that for many years. And we spent a lot of infrastructure dollars to make sure that water that comes into your tap is clean and safe, and then goes back out into the system, is recycled again. I'm Councilmember Matt Orlando. See you next time in Chandler In Focus.